friends, welcome to the Musician's Musician podcast. I am your host, Nick Costa, and today is a doozy of an episode. A few years back, Damien Jurado was looking for musicians to play on an album that would later be called Motorcycle Madness. I decided I'd toss my hat in the ring, as Damien is a songwriting legend, and it would truly just be the honor of a lifetime to be on a record of his. Very much to my surprise, he responded to my email and he said, "I have heard nothing but great things about you and your music for quite some time now. Thank you a million times over for your interest in contributing to my next album. Unfortunately, and I do mean that, all the positions were filled this morning." Was I bummed I submitted just too late to get the gig? Sure, I guess. But we're missing the important part. Damien fucking Jurado knows who I am? And he's heard great things about my music? That's good enough for me. I was on cloud nine. Plus, he said it would be great to share a bill, and I would just want to say for the record that I still agree with that. I think that would be great. We kind of lightly stayed in touch ever since, wishing each other happy birthday on social media and the like. So when I started this podcast, Charlie, my partner, said, "You should ask your pal Damien Jurado." So I did. And he responded again. And this time he said, "Yes, and I would like to talk about Richard Swift." Knowing about his truly special connection with Richard and the incredible albums that they made together, I could not have been more thrilled with that choice. During the conversation, Damien could not have been more kind. It felt like catching up with an old friend. And on top of that, he downloaded Zoom for the first time for this. Can you believe that? Anyway, meet your heroes, kids. It's worth it. And with all of that being said, let's get into it.
The last time I really listened to an album, like from front to back, it was probably when on tour, the last tour I was on, and that was in October. You know, here we are in January.
Yeah.
You know,
what album?
So
was that?
It was many albums actually, because you know I was in a vehicle with a few other my backing band. You know,
Sure.
So I was listening. We listened to like the first electric light orchestra record, ELO record.
Yeah, absolutely.
Which that's a good record. We listened to the first 4 or 5 Kraftwerk records.
Oh yeah, wow.
Because they'd never heard them before. I was like, oh wow, you need to hear Kraftwerk.
Oh yeah.
So tour it became this kind of a. It was fun, you know, because like we were always sharing records back and forth. For some reason, when I'm driving, mostly on tour, I was at that time I was listening to a lot of Sonic Youth as well.
Oh hell yeah!
Yeah,
sure.
I'm a big Sonic Youth fan.
Yeah.
So, but that all being said, that tour was over like October, November. I haven't listened to music since then.
Yeah, I mean. Well,
I never listened to it.
You've been busy though.
Yeah, I've been very busy.
Yeah, you've.
I've been very busy making my own music, right, as well as like mailing things out. Because I have my own record label as well.
Right.
Yeah, and rehearsals and whatever. So it's like, the last thing I want to do is go listen to music.
So, I'm here with Damien Jurado. Damien, thank you so much for being a musician's musician.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
Absolutely. We've already been chatting a little bit, but we're going to get into something that I'm very, very excited to talk about, which is the wonderful life and music catalog of Mr. Richard Swift. But before we do that, I know that you have been really busy with a lot of stuff on your end as well. Is there anything specifically that you would want to chat about? I know we're doing another round of Motorcycle Madness, which is cool.
Yeah, it's I mean, the 2024 saw me doing, I did four. I think it was four. I did four singles on compact disc, 2 songs each. I also put out a live record that I did here in Seattle at St. Mark's Cathedral with my partner and friend, Lacey Brown, who I have a recording company with as well.
Yep.
And then right in 2025, I just released the whole slew of demos from the Maricopa record that I did in 2012. So I've just been like super busy,
you've been.
I just released the Motorcycle Madness, the stereo version, which comes with, it isn't just stereo, but it's also, there's a lot of like added instrumentation. The mixes are completely different.
They're very different. Yeah.
It's a very different record.
It's night and day. Yeah.
It is night and day.
I love it. I think it's great.
Yeah, thank you.
I loved the original Motorcycle Madness. And
okay, cool.
And it wasn't even that long ago. It's not that old, but
no.
So I think that I was at first kind of being like, oh, that's weird. But then I listened to it and I'm like, oh, this is a different record.
Yeah, entirely.
It's great.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I actually was curious what spawned that kind of decision to redo that album?
There are a lot of reasons. One, when I went in to make the record, that was not the plan. The plan was initially to make a record like what sounds like Motorcycle Madness 25, the one that just, is coming out. That was the initial plan. But I went in there to do that, and to give you a bit of a background about that session, I didn't know anybody at that session. The only people I knew at that session was the recording engineer, Sean Wolcott, whose studio we were in Everett, called Soundview Audio Recorders, in Everett, Washington. I knew him, and I knew Lacey Brown, who was playing drums as well as sang on the album. Those were the only people I knew. Oh, I knew Craig. I knew Craig a little bit too, the bass player. He was actually the original bass player of Fleet Foxes, believe it or not.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, he was the very first bass player. That's who's on their debut record, actually, their self-titled album.
Cool.
Yeah, very good bass player.
I believe it.
Yeah, he's insane. So I knew those 3 people. Everybody else, I had no idea who the hell they were. I just when we walked in, and they didn't know anybody else either.
Yeah.
So, one side note, Jack Gibson. I've known Jack Gibson since early 2000s. So Jack, I also knew. He played harpsichord. But again, everybody else, we didn't know. Nobody knew Jack. Nobody knew Sean. Nobody knew anybody. Mm-hmm. And so we spent Monday through Wednesday morning learning the record, like just saying, okay, here's the songs, this is how they go, and we're just going to talk amongst ourselves and figure out arrangements and things like that. And by the way, I told people right away, I was like, I'm not picky about what you play. I hired you because you're incredible musicians based on the demos you sent me and what I've heard. So just play whatever the hell you want. I don't really care. It's going to be great. know, I'm not looking for perfection here. Mm-hmm. So Monday and Tuesday, we spent, from like around 10 a.m. to 5 p.m. just playing the songs with a lot of breaks. I'm a big fan of taking breaks, lunch break, 10-minute break, 15-minute break, whatever.
Yeah, for sure.
So, Sean has both an analog setup and a digital Pro Tools setup, which allows us to use both worlds, obviously, So we're in the Pro Tools rig was just running. We just recorded every single second from 10 a.m. to 5 p.m. We recorded everything.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah. And at the end of Tuesday night, by the way, it's also a side note, nobody knew that we were tracking except for me and Jack and obviously Sean, who's downstairs.
Cool. Okay.
In the control room. Yeah. Nobody else knew. So and every night I'd go home with just, he'd just throw in a few songs. He'd mark the songs as we were playing. Mm-hmm. This would be good for him to hear how it's going. Because I wanted to hear the progress of how things are going.
Yeah.
Day by day. Well, by Tuesday evening, I went home with a batch of recordings, and Jack was with me in the front seat, and he was staying with me for the recording. And we pull in my driveway, and we're just listening to these songs, and I go, and then Jack said to me, "Man, these sound really good." And I was like, yeah, these sound great. And I was like, I think we're done. And he's like, whoa. And I'm like, I think this is it. I think this is what I want.
Yeah.
And so instead of going in Wednesday morning and saying, all right, now's the day we're going to start recording the album, I went in and I said, all right, we're done. And they were like, what are you talking about? When are we going to start recording? I'm like, we've been recording, and I have 2 days worth of recordings, these songs to pick out and choose. And we'll just add some strings here and there. And that's what we did. That's what I did. That became Motorcycle Madness, the original one.
That's very fascinating.
Yeah, it's a lot. I mean, and it kind of goes back to and I did not think about it then, but I thought about it later. I was like, oh, this is like how the Beatles did the album Let It Be.
Yeah, it very much is, especially after watching that
documentary.
Yeah, where they're
this is all they did was record everything.
Yeah.
And then the album just consists of different rehearsals.
Right.
You think about it.
Yeah.
And there's also some rooftop performances. That's the album.
Yep.
And I later went back and I was also reading about, that was also the same year, 2022 was the year I really got into Bob Dylan. I never owned a Bob Dylan record prior to 2022.
Sure.
God's honest truth. And when I get into a band, I go full on. I do a massive deep dive.
Me too.
And one of the things that I really found blew my mind was how he recorded albums. He just basically was kind of the same thing. I'm gonna get some session players together. We're gonna learn these songs and just do it live in the studio.
Yeah.
And I was like, wow, that's incredible. So that's kind of where I got the inspiration to do Motorcycle Madness in that way. Mm-hmm. It was also the inspiration of Phil Spector's Wrecking Crew. Sure. Sessions, just cram a bunch of musicians into a small recording space, mm-hmm. just mic it up and record it live and just see how it sounds.
Yeah.
I mean, and trust me, it was such a nightmare, but it was a beautiful nightmare.
Yeah. Yeah.
It was a mess. But when we went downstairs and listened back, I was like, oh, this actually sounds really cool. So that's kind of the whole story about it. So when I did Motorcycle Madness 22, you're asking what made me go back. Mm-hmm. It was just a way for me to go back and I guess sort of honor my original plan, which was to really just flesh it out. And the big difference the biggest difference was mono versus stereo.
Yeah, for sure.
So, which I love both, but mono is my preferred, so.
Sure. Gotcha. Yeah. I mean, that album does work very well in mono. It's got that sound, mm-hmm. That really tailors to that. So I think that's but it's an interesting choice to kind of go back and do it in stereo and have it show that it still works.
Yeah. And my plan, when I'm not even done. That's the thing. It's like, because I have the first 2 days recorded, mm-hmm. my next plan is to go in and do pull more takes from day one and day two.
Oh, cool.
Like in the most rawest form, but with us talking between songs.
Oh, I'd love that. That would be so cool.
That's my plan. I'm hoping to get it done by, fingers crossed, 2025, and maybe for a 2026 release.
Sure.
But my plan is to do Motorcycle Madness day one, Motorcycle Madness day two. Again, the dialogue because again, we didn't know each other, and most of us had really, we obviously are aware of Everett, Washington, but we don't live there.
Yeah.
So we're like, it's like, so where's there to go to eat around here? Like that's all. That's all on the recording.
Sure.
You know?
Yeah. And obviously you'd snip out all the breaks, but
yeah. So for me, it's like, I mean, I want to release music that I would enjoy listening to if I were a fan of mine.
Yeah.
And so I'm like, and I love outtakes, I love demos, I love session recordings. And so for me, I'm like, I want to do that for Motorcycle Madness.
That's so cool.
Yeah.
That's kind of it's kind of like a blood on the tracks kind of situation where there's more blood, more tracks, kind of thing.
Yes, exactly.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Well, that is very exciting. But I don't want to put off talking about Richard Swift because I would really love to get into that with you. And one thing I normally ask is, do you remember the first time that you heard Richard Swift?
I do, and I didn't like it. I have a friend, Aaron, who knew Richard when Richard first put out independently. It was The Novelist, and then he put out Walking Without Effort, and it came in a reel-to-reel box, an old tape reel-to-reel box with a compact disc inside and a sticker of Richard on the front cover. And he's like, oh God, you gotta hear this guy, Richard Swift. I was like, oh, cool. To me, I was like, this just sounds like somebody who's obsessed with Tin Pan Alley music and you know what I mean? Yeah. And like Harry Nilsson, like, I don't give a shit about this, But I remember thinking I really loved the recording of it, But again, it wasn't that new because, for me, I was like, okay, he's using a 4-track machine. This is obvious. Like you hear the hiss all over this thing, nothing new there. I mean, because I loved a lot of music during that time that was 4-track machine music. Lou Barlow's like Centrido records. Some of the early Beck releases were like this.
Yeah, definitely.
Mountain Goats, early Mountain Goats when they were on Shrimper, I believe the record label was. So I mean, I was used to that sound, and I've been doing the sound myself at home. But all that aside, I thought it sounds really cool. Like he's like, it was all those things I was used to. It was a little different though. It was also like, it was dirtier. It was like the snare hits were so just distorted and dirty sounding. Yeah. And so that I was really into. So I remember thinking to myself, his music's kind of like, it's just kind of okay. I don't really care about the music. But the recording I was really into. Yeah. And that was like early 2000s, Mm-hmm. So, and that was a long period of time before I would then later hear that he got signed to Secret Canadian, which I was on at the time. Yeah. And then eventually meeting him, But Richard and I spent so long never running into each other, but having the same circle of acquaintances.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah. You guys were definitely in the same circles and everything like that. So it's a little funny that you guys didn't even really.
Yeah, we never crossed paths.
When did you guys actually meet?
I met him very briefly in 2006, I believe. 2006 or 2007. My memory's a little fuzzy. I was at South by Southwest, and Secret Canadian were doing a showcase, and him and his band were playing. And it was as brief. I saw him, and I walked up to him, and I said, "Hey, Richard, I'm Damien Jurado." He was, "Oh, hey, dude." And then we started talking about all these people that we knew that we had in common. The conversation, it was like that short. It was so
Sure.
He was about to go on stage.
Yeah, gotcha.
We shook hands. "Hey, I'm Damien. Hey, I'm Richard. Crazy that we've never met." "Oh, yeah. Are you going to watch the set?" "Yes." And that was it. And that was in 2006. And I wouldn't see him again until 2009.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then you guys toured around that time together, right?
We toured. We recorded St. Bartlett together, and then we did a tour in the UK.
Right.
Which was his last tour that he ever did as Richard Swift.
Really?
Yeah.
So because he kind of
after 2000 the 2010 tour in the UK, that was the last real Richard Swift tour there really was, because he wanted to focus on just recording. And at that time, he was getting a lot of work. And not long after that, it just sort of snowballed into, "Hey, I'm going to join the Black Keys and I'm going to join the Shins." And I was like, "What?"
Yeah. Like it's wild to kind of look back at his credits, because you're like, oh, he produced that Nathaniel Rateliff album that blew up, like.
Yeah. And the Pretenders.
Right. Yeah. Where it's like huge records.
Crazy.
And I mean, I really love his records, I think.
Yeah.
Well,
I later this thing is like, that's the thing about I should tell you now is I wasn't a fan when I first heard it, but when Secret Canadian reissued Walking Without Effort, the Novelist, I think I got it all of a sudden. I was like, oh, I get it.
It's interesting that you say that, because I had a similar reaction to his music. Some friends of mine who I was in a band with for a long time, they kept on they're like, "You're going to love this. You need to listen to this." Yeah. And I would keep listening to it and kind of be like, "Yeah, all right. Yeah, I kind of get like, I see what he's doing, and I'm good." But you're right. Like the production is like, that's interesting.
Yeah.
But then as we were actually, I'd reached out to you and you said you want to talk about Richard Swift. So I was like, I got to revisit it. And I had the Hex on vinyl already.
Yeah, I see it back there.
Yep, I got that, and I got Reggae Film Star right next to it.
Oh, no. Now.
Right over there. But yeah, so I went back and I started just listening to everything.
Yeah.
And something clicked. It was just like, oh, okay, I actually love this. Like, this is great. Yeah. And it's all over the place. And there is that like kind of McCartney-esque whimsy to a lot of it. Yeah. But then there's stuff like, Walt Wolfman, where it's like garage rock.
Mm-hmm. There's also the element of like, did you ever get into his project? Not just, did you hear the Onassis record?
Yeah.
Not just that, but then there's also the Instruments of Science and Technology album. Have you heard that record?
I don't think I did, actually.
But that's an entirely different side of Richard Swift. It's called Instruments of Science and Technology. And it's crazy. It's like, to me, had Richard gone in that direction more with that stuff, and I think with Onassis, I mean, I've been like, which I believe, I think he eventually would have done. I really believe that, just because of basically what he was into at the time and what he's listening to. Mm-hmm. The Instruments of Science and Technology is such. There's two records that he did, one for Secret Canadian, and then one he did for the Sufjan has a sub label with Asthmatic Kitty. It's called like It's called like Library something or other. Because there's one that came on Secret Canadian, and the other one, it was like you can't even stream it. It's not even on stream because you have to own the physical copy of it.
Yeah, I mean, I'm seeing it says music from the films of R. Swift.
Yeah.
Which is on that says it's on Secretly Canadian, but
yeah, there's another one.
Gosh, okay, I gotta find out. I'm so curious.
Yeah, dude, need that, dude. Anyways,
yeah.
Both of those albums are just incredible, man.
I'll have to listen.
So, it'll blow your mind. It's like I don't even know what the hell I'd even call the music. It's so like minimal, and there's elements of like David Lynch and Kraftwerk. It's very minimal. It's super dark.
Interesting.
Yeah,
which is not.
In fact, if you go to his Instagram page, a lot of his animations was that kind of music. It was just like very like repetitive, like beats and bloops and blips, and so wild.
Yeah, which he was never really one to refrain from experimentation. I think like he was very experimental, but sparseness wasn't really something that he did a lot of.
No, not at all.
He threw kind of everything at the canvas.
No, it's kind of funny because it's like, I'll tell you a quick story. How we got to St. Bartlett. Mm-hmm. I'm gonna tell you if you don't mind me taking the lead here a little bit.
Please, by all means.
I'll tell you how I'll tell you how I ended up working with him.
Yeah.
So in 2008, I released the album Caught in the Trees. The record did not do well, and I was broke as a joke. And I was like, at the time I was also a part-time preschool teacher at the time.
Okay.
And I was like, I should just quit music and become a school teacher full-time. And working with preschoolers is just the best. They're the best beings to work for ever. Because they have zero filter. They're my kind of people. They have zero filters. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
They're completely honest with you.
Yeah.
They're overly emotional. These are my kind of people. Yeah. So I was a part-time preschool teacher for a long period of time, while I was doing pretty much all of my Secret Canadian years. I was a preschool teacher up until St. Bartlett. In 2008, I released Caught in the Trees, and it did not sell well at all. And I was not seeing money. I was touring my ass off. And again, spending money to make money, not a good idea.
Yeah.
It's horrible. You've done touring yourself. You know exactly what I'm talking about,
Yeah.
So I was like, fuck this. I'm just gonna do preschool work. Well, so I quit music. And I remember having a phone call with Chris Swanson, one of the label owners from Secret Canadian. And he said, yeah, man, we get it. We totally respect it. If that's what you want to do, we're totally fine. We support whatever you want to do.
Yeah. So
months go by, and that was in like January of 2009. Okay. Mm-hmm. And then by late spring of 2009, I get a phone call from Chris Swanson, and he goes, hey, how would you feel if we set it up, you going down to Cottage Grove, Oregon, and working with Richard Swift? And they're like, what are you talking about, dude? I mean, I was like,
yeah,
have you heard my music? Have you heard my music? Have you heard his music? Like, we are entirely two different musicians.
Yeah.
And he's like, yeah, but that's true. You guys make different kinds of music, but you have so much in common. I was like, okay, all right. I was like, what do I got to lose? Okay. So summer came up. It took a little while to get it figured out, but we got it figured out. And I talked to Richard on the phone, and then he's like, "Oh yeah, come on down, and just bring some songs with you, and we'll just hang out. We'll just hang out."
Right.
I was like, "Okay, cool." And again, because I stopped doing music professionally, does not mean I quit writing. I had been writing, like, I was very prolific during this time.
Yeah.
And so I was like, all right. So I said to him, like, well, should I bring a guitar with me? He's like, no, don't worry about it. Just, I got shit here. Just come on down. We'll just hang out, listen to some records, and just hang out. This is what I think I'm getting into. Just like, I'm just going to go to Nick's house and just hang out with him for a while. Hang out with you for a while.
Yeah.
So I walk in to his driveway. I see him. He comes out and greets me. It's good to see him. And he goes, well, let me show the studio. So I go to the studio, and there is a chair in this giant room, which was his main studio room. And there's tons of photos of it. You can see it online.
Yeah.
Where he kept everything. And there was a tape machine and a solitary chair for me to sit in, and a chair just for him to sit in. And then we just started just hanging out, just talking and whatever. And he goes, so have you been writing a lot of material? And I said, oh yeah, I definitely have enough, more than enough for an album, Mm-hmm. And he goes, would you be down to record some of it, like today, like just for the hell of it? And I was like, sure. Why not?
Yeah.
And so he just pulled the microphone in front of the chair. There's no headphones, no nothing.
Awesome.
Just it was a Coles.
Yeah, the
egg-shaped one.
Yeah, definitely.
Hand-looking one.
Yeah, the one that looks like a hand.
Yeah. Flat, burnt hand.
Yep.
But he put the Coles in front of me, a single microphone, and he just had some tape on the machine, and we recorded it. We recorded, like, I don't remember the first song we did. I think it was Rachel and Callie was the first song I did. And then he stops the tape and he goes, dude, that sounds really good. Would you be up for doing more? And I said, sure. So I recorded 10 or 12 songs. Took me about, I don't know, 45 minutes to do the whole thing. And then we were done. He goes, do you want to record more, or do you want to go to Eugene, in Oregon, go to Eugene and grab a burrito and go to, I'll show you the local record store. I was like, okay, yeah. So, but the whole time I was like, what the fuck just happened? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
What the fuck is, it was almost like, I don't know. It was just a really weird experience, So, I mean, I was into it, but I was like, what's going to happen with this? And so there was no talk of it. So we got into his Sprinter van. We drove to Eugene. We're at this, burrito place, eating burritos. And again, no talk of what we just did. Mm-hmm. But we're talking about Captain Beefheart. We're talking about Lou Reed. We're talking about, Hendrix and, Muddy Waters, and just getting to know each other. And I was really into garage rock at that time, 60s garage rock at that time, like 30s. And a lot of early psychedelic music as well. Mm-hmm. And so we're just riffing back and forth. And he goes, we should go to this place called House of Records. I was like, okay, still no talk of what we just did. We're flipping through records. I get 2 records. He gets a stack of 45s. Dude, have you heard this record? No. Have you heard this record? No. And then we go back to the house, to a studio, and we start listening to albums, right? And by this time, it's about 5 o'clock in the evening. And he goes, and then here it comes. He goes, so dude, well, how would you feel if I just like threw bass, maybe some drums and some of the stuff? I was like, sure. Because I had listened back to, I had not listened back to any recordings that I just did.
Sure. Okay. So you didn't know if you were going to like the takes or anything. Like you were just
I didn't know shit. But when he pushed play, I heard the reverb soaked vocal with guitar on one track after the other. And what I heard just blew my mind.
Oh, man. Yeah.
What a gift. I was thinking like, what the fuck, dude? I remember, I get emotional talking about it now, man, because I remember I started to cry. Because I was like, dude, I've never heard myself like this before. And he goes, that's what you sound like,
Yeah.
Oh, that was a trip.
What a beautiful moment. You got to hear yourself in a way that everybody else hears you. And artists don't get to do that.
No. He goes, that's what you sound like. And I go, dude, that's such a trip. And I go, well, I'm into this. He goes, well, do you want me to play bass on something? Sure. But I remember having a panic moment at that moment because I was like, I didn't play to a click track. Mm-hmm. So anything he has to do, there's no fixed time.
Right.
So, well, is that going to be a problem? He's like, oh no, don't. He goes,
nah, I'll just figure it out.
Don't worry about it.
Yeah.
Cam being like this is like, nah, dude, don't worry about it. I was like, okay. And he just puts on this bass guitar and just played. He stood in front of, again, I'd never seen this happen before. Anybody do this. He stands in front of the console, plays back Rachel and Callie, the first song I did, and just starts riffing on it. He doesn't even know the song.
No, yeah. He hadn't been rehearsing it or anything.
No,
you guys went to the record store. You guys went and got burritos.
And I'm just like watching this all happen in front of my face, just being like, what is even going on here?
Yeah.
And I'm just like, we're making a record.
Yep.
This is what's going on here.
Mm-hmm.
We're making a record.
Yeah.
And I think he knew it all along, and he didn't let me in on it.
I think that's really interesting because he probably maybe could sense some kind of apprehension or something like that, and then was just like, "Let's ease that."
I'm sure there was phone calls with him and Chris Swanson being like, he doesn't want to play a record. He's quit music, blah blah blah.
Yeah.
And Richard was just like, "There's no way I'm going to allow that, to happen." Mm-hmm. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So that's how St. Bartlett came about. That's how I got pulled out of retirement because of Richard.
Yeah.
And then I was down there for a total of 3 days. We did that record in 2 days tops. The third day was just mostly conversation and listening back to what we had just did. Mm-hmm. A lot of it was all first take. A lot of it was not. It's not a perfect record at all. There's so many. The timing is off because again, there's no fixed timing.
Sure. Yeah.
It's not a perfect record as far as like that goes, but he began to show me so many records where people speed up, slow down. Mm-hmm. He played me a Bob Dylan record, which I'd never heard. Again, I wasn't into Dylan during this time, but he played me the record John Wesley Harding. I'll never forget this.
Oh, yeah.
And he played me the song, is it Tom Paine, something or other?
Yeah.
And it's just and the drummer just comes in and he drops out and he comes back in again. And it's just like he's like, dude, this is like none of this is fixed time.
Yeah.
Oh my God, dude.
Yeah.
And he starts showing me one example after the other, like, the Velvet Underground records, the some Muddy Waters records, some Canned Heat records, where it's like none of this shit's in time, dude.
No,
and, you know what I mean. And I was like, well, I've been playing with click track, my whole career,
Right. Yeah.
It was just, my mind was blown, man. I mean, he gave me such a massive gift that day.
Mm-hmm.
And I still carry it with me to this day.
Yeah.
Linking it back to Motorcycle Madness, the initial recording, Richard was very much in the room that day. He's remained in every recording session I've done for the most part since then.
Yeah.
No fixed timing, just play it.
Yeah, definitely. I think especially thinking about your catalog, there is like a marked difference when you started working with Richard. Production wise, obviously, for St. Bartlett, but from Maricopa on, I feel like there was a shift, and you might not feel this way, but listening back to your catalog recently, noticed like a shift even in the songwriting, where like you kind of started writing. It seemed to me like you were writing for that kind of production, like you were anticipating what Richard might say or something, or might do, and it's really, really interesting. Not that the records before weren't. I love those records, but
no, they weren't. That's the thing, is that they weren't. They weren't. They weren't at all. With Maricopa, I remember like Nothing Is the News, the first song on that record. Mm-hmm. It's just it's almost like a raga. It's so just repetitive over and over and over and over, and it'll last forever. The title track, Maricopa, same thing. It's just repeated chords over and over and over, almost like a loop, where there's no change. And I just remember him when I went to do that record. Again, he never wanted to hear demos.
I love that.
Never. Yeah. Because there's two looking back, I now see why. One, he doesn't want to be influenced by what he's hearing. Mm-hmm. Second of all, he knows he's going to get the best take out of me. Because when you play something for the first time, if I played you a song for the very first time and I wanted you to hear it, mm-hmm. I'm going to play the shit out of that thing, dude.
Yeah, right.
I'm playing to impress you with this song.
Right.
So that's exactly what he had me do. Like, let's hear the song, mm-hmm. and I played it like I was performing it for him.
Right.
That's basically what I was doing, mm-hmm. So everything I did with him was a performance.
Yeah.
That he's added on top of. And he could tell right away, he's like, oh yeah, okay, so you're into like, Manassas, you're listening right now to, Abraxas by Santana, you're into Sergio Mendes. I could tell everything you're into right now by what you're playing rhythmically. And all I'm going to do is respond to that rhythmically. Yeah. That's why those records, like the Maricopa trilogy, that's why it's very Latin influenced as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Very rhythmic.
Very rhythmic.
Yeah.
And I love rhythm, man. I'll take rhythm over melody or lyrics any fucking day.
Interesting. Okay. Yeah.
Any day.
Fascinating. Yeah. Well, I mean, I wouldn't have guessed because I think you're a very, very talented melody writer, but there is definitely a shift there in those records when it comes to rhythm in your records from that. For sure. Even going to Motorcycle Madness, I mean, that record is incredibly rhythmic, and there's a lot of different percussion going on there.
Totally, yeah.
But it's fascinating that you bring that up, that he was kind of in the room there, because I feel the way about those kind of. You did like 3 records that year, right? There was Reggae Film Star. Well, that was a little bit before. That was like the year before. I think, right?
I did Sometimes You Hurt the Ones You Hate.
Yep.
That was in California, and then and I moved to Washington during that time.
Okay.
And then I did Motorcycle Madness and Passing the Giraffes all in the same year.
That's right. Yeah.
Yeah.
So there is a really similar kind of reverby,
Totally
Richard Swift-esque kind of production mixing value to it that I think is really interesting. Well, cool. That's really, really fascinating to know. And then, I don't know, since you kind of have a little bit of distance from the initial one, is there, I guess you kind of already answered this, but is there like a Richard Swift record that if somebody wanted to dive in that you would point them to?
Oh, I mean, I think for a Richard Swift album, it's really hard to say because I think even his own material was, Richard has a really strong consistency. I mean, solid consistency with his songwriting. But, the only album he didn't produce was Atlantic Ocean. That was the only one he didn't produce himself.
Interesting.
He did that with, I can't remember who did that record.
Mark Ronson. Which is
that insane? He's like working nuts. Like Winehouse and like Bruno Mars. I mean,
right? Yeah, he did Uptown Funk, and he also did The Atlantic Ocean by Richard Swift.
Yeah, isn't that insane?
It's nuts.
So again, Richard's all over the place. It's like, and I love Atlantic Ocean. It's a production. It's a great Richard Swift record, but you're not going to get the production of Richard Swift from that album at all, except the last song on that album, which is Lady Luck.
Oh yeah.
But Richard produced that on a 4-track.
That makes sense. That checks out. It is a noticeably different song.
Isn't it funny that became the biggest song of his catalog?
And that was the one that he did?
Yeah, and that's what Ronson didn't even touch it. So he added that at the very end. So like, what's my favorite Richard Swift record? It's really hard to say. I mean, if I had to I really like that. I really love Richard Swift as Onassis. That's my favorite.
Cool.
But my close runner-up is going to be the Hex for sure.
I love the Hex. I think the Hex is such a good summary.
It's a great record.
Yeah, it's a great summary of like everything that he did.
Yes,
bunched up into one thing. You get the kind of McCartney-esque stuff with like is it Dirty Jim? Is the song?
Yeah.
And then you also have like, wild experimentation and like noisy garage rock stuff. I love that record.
Yeah, it's a great record.
Yeah.
Like that's probably like, because Onassis was more like, I guess, like a little bit of a project, I guess, or side project, if you will. Yeah. But the Hex is, his last record. I mean, it's what a record to have as a last record. I feel it's like it's a beautiful record. It's so dark. It's foretelling. It's really, really, really sad.
It's it's devastatingly sad.
Whether you do it or not, it was a depressing record. You know, a lot is revealed on that record. How he viewed himself as a son, a husband, a father, which was not good. He didn't view himself as a good any of those, really, brother. I mean, but he was. I mean, that's the thing. It's like, I think he was. I feel he was, especially like, a father, a friend, one of the greatest friends, one of the greatest people I've ever known in my entire life was Richard,
Yeah.
But that record is just, phenomenal, man.
It's beautiful. It's a really beautiful record.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I won't keep you for the whole day here, but before we go, a friend of mine who is a very big fan of yours and Richard's at the same time was curious to know, and like, obviously we're not going to mark this as like the official answer or anything like that, but in your opinion, if Richard were to be on this show to talk about an artist, who do you think that he would pick?
in my opinion, knowing Richard, he would have talked about either two artists, Bob Dylan,
Okay.
or probably John Lee Hooker. He was a
Interesting.
big John Lee Hooker fan.
Okay.
Richard loved blues music.
Huh. I mean, that makes sense.
A third guess would have been easily Captain Beefheart. He was a massive Captain Beefheart fan too.
As far as production goes, I feel like that makes sense.
Yeah.
Especially with stuff like the Onassis record.
Yeah. I mean, Richard was like all over the place. I mean, he loved every kind of music for the most part imaginable. I don't think there was a genre he didn't like, you know.
Yeah.
I mean, I can't say that, you know.
Mm-hmm.
There are genres I will never get into. I don't get into.
Yeah.
Richard he was a sponge. He just loved. I mean, I never knew a guy who was just obsessed, and I don't use that word lightly, obsessed with music.
Yeah.
You know, because when you walked into his house, there was music playing. He had this old iPod. He had a few of them. Actually. He had a few of them, and when you walked in the kitchen, you could hear, you know, the Animals or the Beatles or, you know, whatever, John Lee Hooker. And then in the living room, just in the living room, like going from the kitchen to the living room, you know what I mean?
Yeah, just something else.
You might hear something like some obscure new wave band, you know, from the Netherlands or something like that, you know, that you've never heard of before. Yeah. And then you walk outside, you know, and then in the studio, the music was always going in the studio, whether it was something he was listening to, like a mix. If he wasn't listening to a mix, he always had something playing.
Yeah.
You know, he was just obsessed with music. And I remember, I'll tell you this funny story. Something I said to my wife, and I believe I said it to Chris Swanson too. When he passed, I remember saying to my wife and also Chris, I said, I thought he would at least stay for music.
Yeah.
Or his record collection, you know?
Yeah.
But that is a testament of the insane power of addiction, man. You know, I mean, and it's real, baby. It's a disease, you know, it's a disease, and he couldn't shake it. He could not shake it, you know, and, you know, it tears you, it rips you from the very hands, sometimes physically and metaphorically, from the things and people you love the most.
It does.
You know?
Yeah.
It's insane.
It's really good at making you lie to yourself.
It really is. It really is. And to me, you know, when I think about Richard, I feel Richard is very much alive, you know, with me. I feel him all the time. You know, sitting in my office, I feel him. This is where I create. This is where I make things, you know, and I'm in my car. I can just sleep. When I meditate, I feel him, you know. When I'm making music on stage, I mean, I couldn't shake this dude if I tried, man. I couldn't.
And I'm a firm believer that that's real. I really am.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. I couldn't shake him if I tried. I mean, he is everywhere.
Yeah.
And very much alive, you know, in that sense, you know, but physically speaking, no, it sucks. I mean, I can't talk to him on the phone. There's so many times still, you know, even after all these years where I'm like, I want to tell, I can't do that, you know?
Yeah. That is the hardest part about losing somebody, especially, not especially, I mean, it's the hardest, but like if there's like music involved, because like you want to be able to share these things with that person, you can't anymore.
Totally.
But
yeah, totally.
Yeah. I mean, I guess in a way, from the sounds of it, he is kind of sticking around for the music.
Oh yeah, for sure. He's not going anywhere.
Yeah,
No.
that's great.
No. I always feel I have to remind him too, not anytime soon, my friend. But he's waiting. He's just waiting for me to show up on the other side, man.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
I'm like, a long while, guy.
Yeah, you gotta wait.
I got a lot to do here, my friend.
Right. Yeah, absolutely.
Shit to do. By the way, Nick, I didn't know it was Red Hat Day.
Yeah, I was gonna say something, but I thought we were just gonna
We're just gonna roll. I loved it. Red Hat Day all the way.
Red Hat Day all the way. Yeah.
Are you living in California? Where are you at?
Yeah, I'm in Los Angeles now.
Okay.
Yep.
How affected were you from the fires?
So the Palisades fire is like 7 miles from us.
Oh wow.
Yeah, and there was one in Hollywood on Sunset that broke out that got huge, and that was 4 miles from us.
Just recently?
Yeah. I mean, that was like when everything was happening. It was just kind of, it was hard to keep track if you're not like from LA and like watching the fires, you know, like in real time, because I was getting updates like every 5 minutes. But no, I like couldn't sleep the night the fires started. And so I woke up at like 1 a.m. or like I got out of bed at 1 a.m. and I was like, hey, we should pack a bag just in case. Like I have a feeling. And we had previously bought like a bunch of waters. So I was like, I'm going to put them in the trunk of the car just in case. And as I went to put stuff in the trunk of the car, it was raining ash.
Get the fuck out of town, dude.
And so I came back up and I was like, hey, it's raining ash outside. And my partner, Charlie, was just like, we got to leave. So we drove through the night. We got to Las Vegas. We just were like, where's the first place we could go?
You left town? You get the fuck out of here.
We're out. So we drove to Vegas.
You're like me, dude. I'm like, we're getting the fuck going back to Washington now.
I'm not sticking around for this. So yeah, we went to Vegas and we tried to find like a hotel that would take us, and like all of them were price gouging us. So
oh no.
Yeah. So we ended up finding like an Airbnb for like 2 days, and then it looked like the fires were going to keep going. So we went to Tucson, because we had just wanted to go there anyway. So we're like, well, if there's ever an excuse to go.
Love it.
So yeah, we just got back on Saturday, but yeah, it's still going, which is crazy.
It's still going.
Yeah.
I'll be honest with you. This is crazy, dude. So like, here's the thing, like, I can tell you right now, nationally speaking, I mean, I don't watch the news like ever. I'm kind of a dimwit when it comes to that stuff.
Yeah.
It's a conscious choice I made to never watch the news. When I heard about the fires, when I heard about the fires, I made a conscious decision. I was like, oh my God, I have friends there. I want to know what's going on. I was horrified. Yeah. I was like, what in the fuck am I watching right now? This is insane.
It's nuts. Right? And they can't do anything because the winds were so bad. So it's just
now here's the thing though, but I feel like now the news isn't talking about it at all.
Not at all. Yeah. And it's still very much a thing. Well, because there's the president and all that stuff.
Who cares?
I mean, like, yeah, there's also people whose houses are getting burned.
I know.
Like,
so weird. It's like, I don't know, man. Yeah, I felt like after a week, and then it hit radio silence. I was like, what the fuck's going on in California right now?
Nuts. Yeah. And you lived here for a little bit, right?
I lived there. Yeah. My now wife she'd been living in Beverly Hills for quite a long time.
Yeah.
And when I moved down there to be with her, before we were married, I lived like right on Olympic and Robertson, in the corner there.
Yeah. Yeah, we're right on Pico.
Yeah.
So,
yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So like, yeah, I was like, holy shit, this is so crazy. So, but we left in like 2019 when we left.
Sure.
And there was a big earthquake, like the week before we left. I was like, we're getting the fuck out of Dodge.
Yeah.
I'm getting the fuck out of here, dude.
Yeah, man. Let's go back. No, yeah. Yeah, it's funny. We got here, we had moved here in 2020, and then we moved to Vancouver, BC for a couple years.
Okay.
And then when you were making Motorcycle Madness, we had like a thing happen. It's a long story, but I got turned away at the border.
Did
Trying
you
to
really?
go back. Yeah, we came back to do a couple shows, and then I went back, and they were like, "Yeah, you can't come back in. You've been here too long." So,
Oh my God, dude.
we had a friend who like has a guest house in Seattle, and he put us up for a couple weeks.
Oh.
So when you were making Motorcycle Madness, you posted that thing, and I was just like, "Oh my God, I'm in Seattle." So I shot you a message, and I don't know, I doubt you remember, but you were just like, "Oh my God, I just hired the band, but I wish I would have seen this before."
Yeah. Yeah, I know.
But yeah, wild stuff. Wild stuff.
Yeah, man. Well, but you like it in LA?
I love it. I love it here. Yeah.
Yeah, I gotta say, I'll be honest with you. As a Washingtonian, I find this is where I'm from, is my home. But when I got to LA, dude, I was like, I don't never want to fucking leave here, dude. I mean, I love LA.
Yeah. It's weird because when I was touring and I'd go to LA, I hated it.
I couldn't stand it.
No.
In fact, Nick, when I toured LA, all like for 30 fucking years, I was like, I play LA and I would drive to San Francisco.
Yeah. It's just like, let's get out.
Through the night.
Yeah.
I was like, I'm not fucking staying here, dude.
Yeah. No, every show I played here was rough, and like I didn't like it. I didn't understand what it was. And then we had like a friend of a friend who had a spot open in 2020. They had like an Airbnb and they couldn't rent it out because of the pandemic. So, and we were like, well, we kind of want to live in LA. Like, we want to like explore LA. So like,
Sure, yeah.
it was an excuse. And I just fell in love. I was just like, oh, I get it now.
Fuck, that's cool, dude.
Yeah. So we ended up coming back after all that.
See, my bones are getting so old. I'm 52 now.
Yeah.
And I'm telling you, and I as a young kid, I spent some time in Arizona and Texas. But I'm telling you, man, I'm always drawn to Arizona. I'm always drawn there. The older I get, man, my bones are like, please, we can't fucking take this cold anymore, man.
Yeah. No, when I was there just this past week or whatever, I'd like toured through Arizona, played like Phoenix or something like that. But driving through the desert in the day through Arizona, I was like, I get it. Like, I get why people really like it here.
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
And the older you get, your body's like, I didn't like heat when I was a kid. I love heat now. I'm old because I have a lot of aches and pains. And I'm telling you, I have like, man, even when I get to California, I'm just like, oh, this feels so fucking good. I don't like heat. I personally don't like heat.
Yeah.
My physical being, though, loves heat.
It appreciates it. Yeah, yeah.
My aches and pains are like, shit, what the fuck are we doing? We should be living here, dude.
Yeah, yeah. Absolutely. No, I spent most of my life in Minnesota. In St. Paul. And like, I'm seeing the weather right now from friends, and it's like -12 today or something like that as a high.
That sucks.
And I'm just like, yeah, I think I made a good choice. I think I'm all right.
A very good choice.
Yeah.
So when did you move from Minnesota?
2020.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So did you grow up going to like Turf Club and places like that?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. That was my favorite venue. I'd play there. That was like I played a lot of shows at like Turf Club, First Ave, that kind of thing.
See, I'll get to you right now. I normally don't like bar shows at all. Mm-hmm. Turf Club was the exception for me, though.
Such a special venue.
Because everybody shut the fuck up. It was crazy.
Yeah, you can hear a pin drop in that room.
And it's actually a good-sized fucking room. You can fit a lot of goddamn people in that room, dude.
Yeah, yeah. It's like a 400 cap or something like that. Yeah.
It always sounds amazing.
Sounds incredible. And they take such good care of all of their artists, too. I always really appreciated that. And yeah, like you said, everybody who goes to there is usually, I mean, they're there to see the show, right? It's not it's not usually like a bar hopping area. So like, it's very intentional. I actually saw, funny enough, David Bazan there.
Okay.
And he was doing, I think it was the tour for Care.
Oh, wow. Really?
Yeah. Which he also made with Richard Swift. And he had like this whole contraption, his like synth contraption thing that he was playing with for a while. And then he also had a guitar just in case.
Yeah.
And he played like one song on guitar and he's like, you guys are really like quiet and into this. So like, do you guys mind if I don't want to do all that synth stuff. Can I just do the guitar today? And everybody was like freaked out and it was great. But yeah, it really is like that kind of room,
Fuck. Well, I mean, yeah, there's just certain venues across this U.S. or nation. I'm thinking to myself, fuck, I mean, I could play there all the time. Turf Club's one of those places. Shuba's in Chicago's and a place like that.
Yeah.
I'd rather play the Turf Club or Shuba's, over any fucking venue as far as I'm concerned. Like those rooms are so special. And again, there's things like, well, you could be playing like for bigger audiences. Like, why? Like, why the fuck am I doing that? Like,
yeah. I mean, I'll take a packed Turf Club show any day. Any day.
Yeah.
Love that place. So yeah.
All right, man.
Well, yeah. I won't keep you any longer. Thank you so much for taking the time.
Yeah, good talking to you, man.
Good talking to you. If you find your way in LA, let me know. And
I will. I'll hit you up.